excited to be here with our dear guest, Ms. Mansi Baxi, Daya Client Advocate, and Misbah Lakhani, Daya Outreach Coordinator. Thank you so much for being here on this Monday morning. And we have an important topic coming up, healthy relationships, right? And we're going to focus on teen dating violence because it is the Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Yes. So what is the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy one?
So really this can apply to friendships, romantic relationships, relationships with your parents, any relationships in your life. And relationships are really like on a spectrum.
Okay.
So you have healthy relationships, then you have unhealthy relationships, and then there's that tipping point where it can go into an abusive relationship.
Okay.
So with healthy relationships, there's mutual respect, good communication, trust, honesty between you and the other person, and there's equality and safety. And that is kind of, what we would consider a healthy relationship. An unhealthy relationship is when there starts to be some breaks in communication, maybe making assumptions about the other person or not having clarity. There's a lot of confusion maybe. You feel like there's pressure from the other person, or maybe you're putting pressure on the other person. There's dishonesty. Maybe one person is struggling for control. Or even if you start to feel like one person, their opinion maybe is, seeming to have more value than the other person, or just inconsiderate behavior. And then we would go into the abusive end of the spectrum where there's, full-blown accusations, blaming the other person, isolating somebody, manipulation, gaslighting, obviously abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, financial. We've talked about this before, all of the different forms of abuse. So that's, where it would go into that next category.
Okay. And then before we get into it, can you tell us the difference between, we know what physical abuse is, right, and financial as well. But what about the emotional abuse?
Yeah.
Like, can you give us a few examples?
Yeah, so with emotional abuse, it can be also considered as like bullying the other person. There's verbal abuse is typically a part of emotional abuse. Psychological abuse is also linked, but maybe like bad-mouthing the other person, name-calling, making it feel like the other person is less than, or, if you're in that abusive dynamic, maybe making, feeling like you're a child and like you don't have autonomy, putting somebody down. There's so many things that can kind of be included in emotional abuse, but even manipulating somebody for not really doing anything wrong, but just because the other person is upset, just there's an unhealthy balance basically between both people.
And then emotional and mental is the same thing?
It's not necessarily the same. It can sometimes be based off of how it affects the other person. So with emotional, it's, using some of these tactics to break down somebody's confidence and self-esteem, whether it is through psychological, emotional, or verbal abuse. There's financial abuse as well, which is, maybe one partner having all of the control, whether you're experiencing that, your partner is monitoring all of your spending, doesn't give you access to money, steals your money, maxes out your credit cards, opens up accounts under using your social security or identifying information without your consent. Even like forging a signature without your consent can be considered financial abuse. And then, with our clients, typically our main categories are physical, the emotional, verbal, psychological, sexual abuse, financial. There's in-law abuse as well. We see that a lot in our community, of course.
I was just going to say, do you want to also talk about religious abuse?
Yeah, I was going to bring So I have a client right now. And that is actually the main premise of their entire relationship is really stemmed from the religious abuse, because one partner converted before marriage, but
Okay.
has now used that against that partner.
Oh.
And has gotten the family to also be abusive because of the change in religion. And it is really just putting somebody down for any beliefs or traditions or values that they have. And I think when you also have children, it becomes a
Yeah,
bigger
it's
thing
harder.
because, one person may want the child to be reared in a faith that the other parent is not. But sometimes there's confusion or there's resentment in this client situation where it's the male partner who converted to marry the female partner,
Okay.
but now he and his family are abusing the client because of it. And then, taking their children to the temple and doing things that are not agreeable to the other partner and without the other partner's consent.
Oh my.
So it really, it's kind of situational,
Yeah.
but it's very complex. And then that's also where like the in-law abuse ties in. And then we have all of our traditions and everything, regardless of what South Asian country you're from or culturally where you're from, we have traditions, right?
Yes.
And rituals and things that we do. And so, this client is going through a lot of those things right now. But did you have something in mind specifically?
No, I just feel like when people talk about types of abuse and they arrive to like potentially emotional, psychological, right, and financial, but I think there's still so many more unique forms of abuse that we see so often or more often than others. Including religious abuse, like transnational abandonment was like a big topic last year that like I had mentioned and started talking about with just people in the community, and they were like, "What is this word? Like, what is this whole thing?" And again, for a migrant population, like where we originate from one country and then are here for another country, there's such a space in which abuse can occur where you're being taken to your home country and then being left there, or vice versa. Here, you're being brought here from your home country and then being abandoned, and then that person
And
moving
that's
back
done
to
by the partner?
yes, yeah.
This is really common, and then using the children as the tool to aid the abuse. And I would say this also ties into immigration abuse, which is very common in what we see at Daya. Because, we are an immigrant population and a lot of our statuses are linked to our partner.
Yeah.
And you can immediately lose status if there's divorce. And custody becomes a big problem. So this is why some abusers start to use transnational abandonment as a form of protecting themselves, or maybe wanting to go back to the home country and then filing for divorce and custody there, so it doesn't apply in the United States, because jurisdiction is another big piece of this. So it's complex.
That's a lot, yeah.
Very complex.
But it really depends on the client.
Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing the different forms of abuse, because I always heard of emotional and mental, and I'm like, what is the difference, right? But they could be interconnected, or they could be, it just depends on the situation.
Sometimes they are interconnected. Sometimes with like psychological abuse, it might be using psychological tactics against the survivor. So it really varies. But I would say these are like the main forms of abuse that we see.
So how can someone recognize if they are in a unhealthy relationship?
One thing, so I'm single and I date, and something that I actually do is, there's something called the cycle of abuse, and we'll talk about that later on. But I will go through the cycle of abuse, or like, I do this to kind of gauge where I am in a relationship, because I think sometimes when your emotions get involved, you can't always see clearly, or you can't see a situation for exactly what it is. So sometimes I do that. And I Google like red flags and things like that.
Okay.
But like you can do that. But I would say if you feel that there's any anxiety you're feeling with the other person, or if you feel like you're not being heard, or if you even have a fear of speaking up with the other person, that can sometimes be a sign of an unhealthy, or the starting or the beginning stages of an unhealthy relationship. If you feel like, again, there's starting to be a power dynamic where you feel like it could be something small, like, you know, one person's choices of restaurant is always picked versus the other person. That can sometimes be symbolic of how the power dynamics could be down the line.
Yeah.
That's in a romantic relationship. But you should always feel safe enough to be able to give your opinion or speak without having fear. And if you're starting to feel like there's some friction there, I think that is a good indicator that something is off.
Yeah.
And it could just be that you need to have an open conversation with whoever that other person is. But yeah, I would say that can be a good beginning stage. What do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, similarly to what you said, my, like, one that I was actually like presenting on this one time, and there were a group of like young people who were in the room, and they were just like, so here's my relationship, like here's kind of like what's going on in my life, and what, like, is this bad? And I was like, I can't answer this for you. And so how we kind of went about it is that we kind of pulled up the relationship spectrum. So like the relationship spectrum, like what Mansi mentioned earlier, has like healthy, unhealthy, abusive, just like as 3 categories, and like kind of like what each type of relationship looks like. Right. And so we would go through it where it's like, okay, so what about communication? Like, where does it fall? Like, how do you feel? And then we wouldn't look at like the big categories. We would just look at like, does he communicate well? Does he communicate poorly? Are y'all fighting all the time? Like, what is happening? And looking at the actual aspects of the relationship and kind of sitting with yourself and seeing. Thankfully, she just was going through a rough time, but they had a really fun dynamic and it was great. Wish them the best. But that's how I would suggest it, where it's like this resource or the spectrum, like you can just search up relationship spectrum and it'll pull up on Google.
Okay, that's
so it's like all of these resources are really free, and you can like even sit with your girls, and if it's a romantic partner, you can sit with your best gals and best pals and kind of go through like, hey, I have noticed that this happens in your relationship, and maybe they can give you some clarity too, because sometimes you can't see a red flag straight ahead, like you need somebody to look at it from the side type of deal. But if it's with your friendship, same deal, where it's like you can sit with yourself and just say like, hey, I haven't hung out with my friend in so long, and whenever we do, it's a bad time. Like, what does that mean? And like we're always kind of just tiptoeing around each other, and we're not really like genuine with one another. So like, what does that mean? Is this really my friend? Like, all of these conversations can be had if like you kind of just sit with yourself and see how you feel.
Like, how do you feel after interacting with that person? Do you feel happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel supported? Or do you not feel those things? Do you feel worse about yourself? Do you feel like your anxiety spikes after interacting with them, or even in the process of trying to interact with them? And then really trying to stay grounded in, you know, what is working for you. And of course, like, everybody has different limitations and boundaries, and it's all subjective, right? Of like what each person considers okay. But if you're just looking at it very generally, and this is what I mean earlier, is like I will pull up the relationship spectrum, or I will pull up like the history of abuse checklist, and I will read like all the things. I'm like, wait, you know, separate my feelings for a moment. What is on paper? What is actually here?
And I think, Misbah, you made a good point too, because sometimes we are not that level-headed to judge ourselves or go, like you said, right? To check. I mean, that's amazing that you do that, but sometimes we're so emotionally in it that like a friend sitting with you might help you see it, right? So just being there for your group of friends. I thought that was a really good point. What about teen dating violence awareness? How can parents foster open communication with their teens to create a safe environment for discussing relationships, concerns, and red flags?
Yeah. Okay. This is a big one, especially in our community. We are still at the point where we feel like our children do not date, right? Our teenagers do not date at all. That is really bad. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your children are probably dating.
Yeah.
And I think it's not this thing where it's like now you must like shelter your child from the wild world because they can potentially be dating, right? And there are some families and there are some like traditions and there are still some like people out in our community who still believe this, right? On one hand. On the other hand, there are people who are okay with their children dating while they're teenagers and as young adults, right? But they don't know how to set them up for success. And I think there is a wide range in between of parents. And I think it is just important to normalize the fact that they will probably date. And if you're not comfortable with that fact yet, to be first comfortable as parents with that and sit with it. And then two, once you're ready to actually have conversations with your children, I think that's the time where it's like you need to create a space where it's like that's like safe, right? That's safe. That feels like your children can actually come to you with these problems and not judge them.
That's where
I mean, we both have teenagers.
Yeah.
So,
and I was like, how are you feeling about it?
I feel like everyone's definition of a safe space might be different.
Yeah,
So
but the norms of a safe space, right, are that you aren't judging. You are listening. Your feelings are removed from it, or at least you can't see, like the other person can't see them. You might have a lot of feelings inside, right? But they're not being shown. And also, before these conversations have happened, there is a level of trust built already where your child is coming to you before with other serious things that may be risky to talk about or taboo to talk about. And if that relationship is built, it'll be really easy to talk about stuff like dating. But that trust, that like open conversation space should already be existing. Otherwise they're gonna hide. Otherwise they aren't gonna tell you the truth. And it's more, and again, it's about this thing where it's like now that is then not the time to shield or shelter the child, right? It's more because the more that you try to hide and the more that you restrict, the more children are going to find their own ways or just not tell you when something really bad happens. And because you're not a trusted like adult. And I think, those are all of the things. I feel like I could ramble about this topic for hours, but since you mentioned that you have a teenager, like how, like tell me a little bit about that.
We have a few minutes before we go on a break, but Alifia has a teenager who is dating. Mine is not dating, and I'm actually one of those parents, and my husband's more open-minded than I am because I guess I'm more protective about my son. I'm like, how is he going to handle a heartbreak, right? So he talks to a lot of girls, and then I'm like, okay, what happened? You're not talking to her yet? He's like, yeah, I mean, we spoke, but like I don't think I really like her, so we had to like end it, so because I was not going to ask her out. So I'm like, okay, that's a good thing. But I'm trying not to like get in the way because if I discourage it, then I feel like they'll do it more. So I'm like, you decide for yourself, right? But Alifia, how is it going on your end?
It's going. So he was dating this girl, and then they broke up for something which he discussed with me, and then I was okay with that. But then again, it was all cleared out, and they spoke it out and stuff. So, but he does come in and tell me stuff. So I guess he's open about it.
Yay!
It's a testament to both of you as parents for actually like creating those spaces and being self-aware as a parent to not center yourself in their dating life. It's a huge thing.
It is.
It's not common.
It's not.
I mean, I have to hold myself really because my husband is completely like, he should date, and he's giving him advice like, this is what you do, and I'm like, I'm just gonna zip it up.
Well, I think also something as parents that could be helpful is like even having open conversations about the main relationship your child is seeing is yours,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
So leading by example, but even
Yeah.
having open conversations with your children about what do they not like to see in your
Yeah.
own relationship,
Oh yeah, that's
and
a
being
good
able
point.
to talk about those
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
because
Be able to
nobody's
face it.
perfect.
No.
Nobody has a perfect relationship. There are always going to be issues, you know.
Yeah.
But I think being aware enough to talk about it for yourself and then for your child, so that they maybe also won't have
Yeah.
or like make those mistakes or go through those same patterns in their own relationships, especially because it's such a formative time
Yeah.
of their life.
Yeah,
like,
they're just beginning.
and there's
you know.
hormones and
So many raging hormones.
and
Yeah.
you know, media tells them one thing,
Yeah.
parents say another,
Another,
school says
yeah.
something else. Like there's so much confusion.
Yeah.
And
Going on.
I
yes.
think being like that steady
Yeah.
space for them
them.
where they won't be judged and not punished either.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I can talk about my personal experience. Like I was not able to share with my parents about dating until I was 30.
Oh wow.
And it took a long time, but I think the main reason I never did is because of the judgment or the fear or that I would get punished in that moment for something. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not. It's already so much more complicated. We're not getting there. But yeah. But I think to wrap it all up, I think it really is about creating that safe space and making sure that teenagers who are getting so much information from social media as well,
Yeah.
and like and no filtering of what is correct or what is right or what is like feels right, and subscribing to the norms and making sure that you are the best person or you're doing everything right is such a thing that you also go through in teenage years. And so I think to be that space where it's like there's no judgment.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break and we will continue this conversation right after. Welcome back to Chai Time on 103.5 Hum FM. We are talking to Mansi and Misbah about healthy relationships. So what are some things that parents can do to help their teens date safely? And like we mentioned before, especially in our culture where in a lot of families dating is not happening. So go ahead.
You want to go first?
I think you've been doing a great job leading the conversation. You
So
got this.
I would say just educating your children on healthy relationships, regardless of what type of relationships they are going to be in. Talking about like red flags, talking about gaslight, like even for your kids to know what these things are. Pulling up that relationship spectrum and you know, educating them about it. Another thing that we go over with our clients, it's called the cycle of abuse. And basically it's about abuse is quite literally a cycle. You know, you have the honeymoon phase where things are good. There's gift giving, apologies, all the niceties and the love. And like, sometimes there's love bombing in this phase as well. And then as time continues and, you know, there might be some conflicts or things going on, you go into the tension building phase where you might start seeing that there's some of that power control dynamic change. Maybe one partner's blaming or accusing the other partner of something, being critical of them, making little comments. I think a big one we see in our community is making jokes at the expense of the other person, especially in friend groups. I've seen this a lot with like my parents' generation is like, you know, in big family or not even family gatherings, in like friend gatherings, all the couples are there and, you know, the husband might make a joke about his wife in front of everyone and it might seem like it's in jest and it's for fun, but actually it's not. It's putting somebody down. And it can feel manipulative and gaslighty sometimes. So I would say this is like the tension building phase. And then you move into like the explosion phase where that's where you see like the traditionally abusive behavior of like the physical, verbal, emotional abuse. And, you know, you'll have that big explosion. There will be some sort of incident that has happened, a big fight. And then when things calm down again, you go back into that honeymoon phase and the apologies, and it's that cycle. So even just explaining how these unhealthy relationships work with your kids. And I think this cycle can be applied to any type of relationship, because it can happen with friends, it can happen with your parents, it can happen with anyone. It can even happen with colleagues. Like, you just never know.
Yeah.
So just being open about these things from the get-go, even when they're younger. Like,
Yeah.
I would say it doesn't even have to be when they're a teen. I would start at 5 or 6, when they're going to school, kindergarten, talk to them of like, what is a good friend? And like, what are good friend as in a healthy relationship, and like,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Yeah.
And like teaching those things over time. And then again, we talked about this on the break, not
Yeah.
don't punish your kids when they want to talk to you either.
Yeah.
That's not always like the time for it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think my like very different point was going to be how to my previous point where there needs to be like a lot of trust built between the parent and the child, right? And I was thinking about it in the way that like a parent in a position where a child doesn't know much of their life before they were a parent, right? Like, they've only known their parent as a parent, and kind of also talking about like, hey, we never actually talked about any of this stuff, but you can still come to me, and trying to make sure that, again, that safe space, like how to actually build it, it's through being really honest, right, with your children when they are like in age appropriate manners. It's also being vulnerable in your direction to the child, and yours as in the parents, where the parent direction to the child being very vulnerable and being very honest and open about like what you even wished out of the relationships that you had with your family, or with whatever it is, or with your friends. Like, I've had so many friendship breakups, and like it all sucked, but it had to happen because they just weren't treating me well, and whatever it is, and to offer that vulnerability and making it so that it is something that the child can do and can emulate, kind of modeling behaviors in a way.
Yeah.
To make sure that when all of this information is being given, it's also being given in a space of like, hey, I want you to do better and have a better life than I did, because all parents want that for their children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like parents had a life before their child,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So at the right age, or when it comes up, actually talking to your kids, I like that point a lot, of like being honest with your kids about what you've gone through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also that just builds trust between a child and a parent anyways, like for them to better understand you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, opening up the conversation. What role does education play in preventing teen dating violence?
It is everything. I think I'm such a person who thinks knowledge is how we protect ourselves, how we make ourselves better, how we, like, it is power. Like, knowledge is power to me, to everyone, I hope. And I think the only thing that can protect us is knowing what to do, and knowing what is appropriate and what feels right, even. Like, sometimes it's not even about like what is, and being in the perfect relationship can go down a whole other rabbit hole, but something that feels right, right? And knowing what that looks like, what that feels like, what that is supposed to bring to your life, and what good things it's supposed to provide in your life. I think that's the only thing that can prevent you, and also make you realize when it's definitely not that. Like, I've been told all of these things should happen in a relationship, should happen between my friendships, should happen between all of my like family members. This is how they should support me, and I know that this is not happening, and I can rely on that knowledge, you know? So I think knowledge is kind of the biggest one. And again, we've been talking so much about this, where it's like you can model these behaviors and like see, like, this is what I grew up with, and it felt so nice, and I felt so heard, and this is not the thing that I'm experiencing right now. And I think really evidence and again knowledge really sticks with us, like sticks with
Yeah.
our brains, where it's like we know that this is what we like. Just I don't know, you probably know better how the brain works, and and with your public health background, like you would probably know more about like what the actual brain does potentially,
Yeah.
of like, you know, because I'm thinking about it in the sense of like your brain only trusts what it knows.
Yeah.
And the more that you can tell your brain different things about good and bad and right
Yeah.
and wrong, and not even in this like hyper moralistic way, but just like it feels good,
Yeah.
it does good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus
Good
it
point.
doesn't feel good, it doesn't do anything good.
Yeah.
And then your brain can kind of get that pattern and just recognize that pattern of like, this is the good one, this is the bad one,
Yeah.
in the very, very basic sense.
Yeah, and this is where trauma comes in, right? Trauma literally alters your brain pathways. Like, we see this a lot with our survivors, especially if they've experienced physical abuse, but there's something called traumatic brain injury, where if you've even been shaken, it doesn't even mean if your head has had impact. But even if you've been shaken by somebody excessively, it can actually cause memory loss and brain fog. And, you know, there's medical studies. And if you even talk to your doctor, if something like this has happened to you, you can talk to your doctor. They can do a screening to see where you lie, and see like how you can, you know, get the right
Yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
But something you said that also stuck with me was, if, you know, as a parent, if you don't have the knowledge or the capability or don't know how
Yeah.
to have this conversation, I think acknowledging that as well,
Yeah.
of, you know, I haven't had this experience, like what we talked about
Yeah.
earlier. Times were so different,
Different,
20,
yeah.
30 years ago,
Yes.
even 10 years ago for some people. Being honest about what you don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
And then maybe seeking resources where you can direct your child.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was just gonna
Yeah.
add that.
And you
Yeah.
can, and to the parents out there listening, you can always reach out to us, and we have so many resources
Yeah.
for you. And like I don't know about you, but I know my whole job is literally educating the community, and
Yeah.
so like I will go out into the community wherever
Yeah.
and have conversations with parents, you know, and
Yeah.
like that is something where it's like these conversations right here, where it's like they are your resources and you can use us too. So that is my little plug for Daya today.
I know, like, I primarily work with clients, but something I try to challenge my clients in is that sometimes they fall into the same pattern that they're experiencing. They then use that and put it on their child because they then want to control their child because they're being controlled by their partner. So you can directly see, sometimes when I'm working with clients, like I can see exactly the pattern repeating, and this is where generational
abuse
and
cycle,
everything
yeah.
comes in, the
Yeah.
cycle. But like you can see it. So I bring it up to my clients. I kind of, you know, if I notice it after 2 or 3 sessions that I'm noticing those same behaviors or that mindset,
Yeah.
I bring it up in a gentle way. But sometimes even if, you know, you see your parent, if there are kids listening to this in their car with their parents, trying to even have those conversations again, if it's safe. But
Yeah, because I was thinking about it. Like, what if the parents are in an abusive or whatever, unhealthy relation, not
Yeah.
abusive? So how do then they communicate? I mean, first they have to realize it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
This
and
is
then
where, like,
share.
self-awareness is important. Going to therapy is
I was
really
literally gonna
important.
mention
Like,
that.
if you know, pull up the relationship spectrum and you feel like you're somewhere on there that's not primarily healthy,
Yeah.
just reflect.
Yeah.
Look at your past relationships. Look at your own behavior. Look at the behavior of your partner. And of course, like, seeking therapy, I know there's so much stigma, but it really is so helpful. It's so important. And it's a huge part of our survivors' healing and also our survivors' children. Like, yes, you know, Daya, we provide counseling to our clients. We don't work with children, but we offer a lot of resources and referrals for even survivors' children to get counseling. So that also is really helpful.
What are, did we speak about is what are relationship red flags?
No,
Okay.
we haven't done that.
We've been talking so much about all of these red flags. But it's actually, again, very similar to what Mansi actually set up when it came to, like, what emotional abuse kind of looks like. It would be just kind of like a lessened version of it, where it is controlling, where there is some controlling involved of like, hey, you shouldn't sit next to this person at lunch. Like, I'm thinking about a typical high school, right? Where it's like, hey, we shouldn't sit with these people, like, we should sit here, even though you want to do something else. You know, very small, very minute thing. But
and in the beginning, it might seem like, oh yeah, you know, like all excited and fluttery.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very, very strong.
Just as friends about dating and stuff, but even like somebody telling you what not to say or what to say is another big one. I would say is like, you know, going back to the cafeteria room in high school. If your crush is telling you like, oh, you shouldn't be saying like you shouldn't be saying that, you shouldn't dress like this. I think appearance is another big one, like trying to tell somebody how to dress, how to exist in society, isolating. Like if you start to notice that they no longer want you to hang out with your other friends or with your family, that's a pretty big red flag, I would say. Of course, like with sexual relationships as well, because that will start, you know, in the teen age years. That taught, like, even having conversations with your kids about safe sex, like what is safe sex, because you know, we don't always know what is being taught in school. So, you know, as the parent, maybe being proactive, again, without judgment, having conversations about like sexual education. You know, is somebody forcing you or pressuring you to do something? And this can honestly go in either dynamic. Like gender, it doesn't really play a role here. It's really for anyone. If you feel pressured by someone to do any sexual act, even kissing or touching, if it's not comfortable and you feel like somebody's pressuring you, I would say that's a really big red flag as well. If they have like a temper, or just get like irrationally angry about something that really may not be a big deal to you, that's another big red flag.
I was going to just say, again, in the digital age that we have, where it's like, you can't post this. You can't like somebody's story. You can't comment, where it's like, and it's not going to be framed as like, you can't. I feel like it'll be like, hey, why did you do that? Like, I didn't like the fact that you did that. And you just shouldn't, because like, it makes me feel so upset that you do all of this. And like kind of sweetening it in a way, but still that effect is like, hey, I didn't like it, but you have no other option but to listen to me. And it's not a conversation where it's like, hey, I didn't like that you do this, but can we talk about it? Like, why did you do this? This is why it makes me uncomfortable. That's the difference between a red flag versus a conversation, you know? So I think that's what it is, where it's like trying to make sure that the base root is like, hey, I didn't like this. Hey, I don't want you to do this. And then that's it. That is the end of the sentence. And there is no other option to go about it.
Or even like making joke about your preferences or interests. Like if somebody's making fun of your partner's making fun of something you really like or enjoy. And you can normally tell whether it's genuinely a joke or if there's like this insinuation of something else. And again, it's the pattern of those things happening as well that can, you know, make something that is a small behavior really be a red flag. Also, I think like omitting information, or lying about things that, you know, they don't think are relevant but really are relevant. It's like lying by omission. I think depending on the situation can also be a big red flag.
I know we've spoken a lot about romantic relationships, but how do unhealthy relationships affect families?
So, I think we've also kind of circled around this topic of we model things. We model behaviors. What we see is kind of what we seek out, right? And I think it's really difficult to also have open and honest conversations when you know that your parents or your family dynamic of whatever kind has not made you feel trusted in the past. And I think, and the same things are going to apply, right? Where it's like, you can't go here, you can't go there, end of story, because I'm your guardian, I'm your parent. The same red flags are going to apply, but and here's the tricky bit that Miss Client Advocate could really help me with, where it's really tricky because you want to be able to trust your parents, and you want to be in a situation where you can go to your parents about situations going on at school. But when you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Where do you go? You do contact a trusted adult, and that is the best option. And to go to a teacher that you really like, and to go talk about, hey, this is all of the stuff that's going on when it comes at home and school, and they could help with both. And thank God for teachers for that reason, or just any family person or any person in your community that you interact with that you do go to that is safe, right? But those red flags and those unhealthy dynamics, because of what we've been talking about, they don't necessarily look any different. Actually, they can be more impactful because it's coming from your parents. And it's going to feel more scary and like more restrictive because it's coming from your caregivers.
I would say if there's a teen experiencing this, you can contact Daya. Like, you can call our helpline. I personally have clients where the family violence, it's not an intimate partner. It is quite literally the abuse they're experiencing from their parents. I have a lot of clients that are college aged. So like, they might still be living at home with their parents, but they've started college, but parents are still controlling them. They're restrictive on where they're where they can go, restrictive about food, restrictive about, especially with girls, like, I'm going to take you back to India and get you married off. This is a huge one. Like, it comes up way more than I think people realize. I would say, like, all of the toxic behaviors that you would face in a romantic relationship, but I think it's harder when it's your parents, because sometimes they use the fact that you exist against you, but they're the ones that brought you into the world, so then they can blame you sometimes. Another one is you are financially dependent on them in every sense. Whether it's food to education or transportation, whatever it is, all of your existence is based on your parents, and it can create a lot of barriers in situations where they're not safe for you. But I would say, like, controlling behaviors, again, the judgment, the shaming, punishing you for things, and all of these things really do come down to you also not feeling respected by your parents. And I think in our community, this is a big one where, culturally, we're told that you must respect your parents no matter what. And you must do everything that they tell you. It's almost like you have to turn your brain off and just do what you're told. And that's not productive for you, nor is it productive for your parents, or typically in those dynamics, it's also one parent who is in power over the other parent. So you'll see that, again, this is where that generational cycle of abuse comes in, where it's not, yes, you're controlling the child, but typically then one parent is also being controlled. But if it ever goes to a very dangerous position, just call, like, I agree, talk to somebody at school, talk to a friend if you're, just worried, talk to a friend's parent that you trust. That is also a good option. Call Daya, like, we will find you the right place, where, whatever other organizations can help.
I can't believe it's already time to go. But is there anything you want to share before we say goodbye?
No, I'm so happy that she is here. I think it's always a treat when somebody from the client services team is here and can actually talk about real situations.
Their experiences. Yes. Thank you so much, Mansi, and thank you, Misbah, for being here. This was a wonderful conversation. And thank you to our listeners. We'll see you Monday, same time, same place. Bye bye.